So welcome everyone. This is the third interview on the power of listening, and today I'm joined by Jacquie Moses. I'm excited to be talking to Jacquie on this topic. Jacquie's a 3P practitioner, so she shares our about everyone's innate well-being and the inside-out nature of our experience. She's got a rich and varied past, and I will in the comments below this video, there's a link to another interview where you can find out more about that, and I highly recommend that everyone watch that. Not only will you learn more about Jacquie, but you'll learn about the work she does, and you'll get a sense for it for yourself as well. But Jacquie's worked in education with organisations, in the community and the NHS, in the criminal justice system. You've contributed to research and are a founding member of the Wisdom and Wellbeing Collective. Just to mention a few things, I don't know if you want to expand on any of that, Jacquie?
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much, Victoria,
Welcome.
for that introduction. And yeah, you've covered a lot. Before coming across the three principles, I worked in banking. Then, I kind of made my way into personal development and became a coach in 2005, actually qualified. And then came across the principles that we both share in 2012. I was going through a very difficult time at the time. At that point, I was struggling with stress and feeling quite low. And I was coaching clients, and I thought that they were doing better than me. And some coaches or people that work with people may be able to relate to that. Yeah. And I was going around and around and around, just overthinking everything. And then I came across this understanding that made a difference. And I've been very fortunate, as you said, to share it with children, young people, mothers of children that are being exploited by gangs. I've worked with in the criminal justice system in prisons.
Yeah.
For over 4 years as one of the founding team members. It's not my company, it's Beyond Recovery, was founded by somebody else, but I was one of the first team members, about 3 or 4 of us that were there from the very beginning, right up until just before lockdown, 2018, 2019. But did it for 4 years, sharing this understanding as an intervention and mental health intervention in prisons, 2 prisons. Yeah. And it was the first of its kind. And yes, I did help with the research at the very beginning. I caught up on that.
And through that work, I know you've impacted on like many lives, and I know, like, just from spending time with you, but also knowing a bit about the work that you do, that listening forms a big part of that. And so, as an introduction, I just wondered if you would share a little bit about what deep listening means to you, or listening with love, whichever way you want to put it.
Yeah, I love the idea of deep listening. How it looks is that I'm here and someone's over there and I'm listening to their words. That's what it looks like when we talk about listening. That's the way I see it a lot of the time. So that's how we all see it. And there's something about deep listening when we start to explore listening. There's different levels and layers to listening. And I think that's what we're pointing to, that we can be listening to information, taking it, receiving it, bringing it into our minds, assessing it, working it out, and working out a response. And then what I understand deep listening to be is it's not that type of listening we're talking about,
No.
right? Not that everyday listening that we're doing. It's a deeper type of listening. And for me, I really thought about it yesterday because I was thinking, oh, what am I going to talk about? And because it just changes, and because when you're actually listening like that daily, because I work and I listen to people daily, you forget how to describe it,
Yeah.
or what it is that's happening. So really, the question really helped me to think like, what is deep listening? And what came to me, which very, very fresh, is listening is a state of deep listening, is a state of being absent of the mind.
I love that.
Right? It's that that type of listening that doesn't need words for you to respond. Right? It's like you hear it all. You hear it all. There's so much information that comes in that space. It's like a space of awareness, and the person speaks into that space. Or when I'm speaking into that space, when someone's deeply listening to me, there's a silence, there's a spaciousness. And so I see it as a state of being with the absence of the mind. And I'll say a bit more about that, but it feels like it's our natural state. Deep listening is our natural state, absence of the mind.
And when you have so much to pick up on there. um, but when you say absence of the mind, to me, um, that means, and you already mentioned it at the start, the absence of the working out of figuring out like how I'm going to respond, or what I think about what's been said. Just the like barrage of thoughts that can be going on when you're just like listening day to day. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So most of us listen to give a response. We want to get a point across. So we're listening so we can respond, or we're listening to understand, or we're listening. So we're listening through filters, you know. So much goes on when someone says something and we hear it. There's a process that goes on there. It looks really simple, but it doesn't. It's like sound comes into our ears, it bounces around, goes through filters in our mind, and then we make assessments through our perception of life and our own judgments. And so we, most of the time, are listening to respond, we're listening to assess, to work out, we're listening through our filters. Are they right or are they wrong? We're listening through our filters of I know more than them, or do they know more than me? We're listening through these natural filters that human beings have. We're listening from our judgments about others or ourselves. We're listening through the filter of just cultural things that through our culture, what we know. We're listening through what we already know. That's a good way to sum it up. It could be cultural things, it could be religious things, it could be being a woman, it could be listening from being a woman, listening from being a man. There's things, conditioning that we have, and we're listening through these filters.
So when you talk about deep listening as being the absence of that,
Yeah.
and we'll get onto it being a natural state in a minute. but seeing as you mentioned that, have you always deeply listened, or was this like something you came across at a particular point?
Good question. The answer is no. And I don't always deeply listen now. So I think it's important to say that, you know, I see listening like on a scale. Not listening, or we can be deeply listening. Not listening. Depends what we're listening to.
Pretending to listen.
Exactly. You're getting ready and someone's talking to you. You're not really listening. Okay, you're nodding. Yeah, okay. And in my mind, I've got to go back and ask them what they said because I can't even retain the information anymore. So, right, so we're on this kind of sliding scale. It's just a description. And if when you say have I always listened deeply, and the answer is no, I thought I did, right? And I've done many courses. I mean, I'm a trained coach. I've been a coach since 2000. I've been coaching, doing those kind of courses for 22 years, 23 years now,
Wow.
right? Personal development courses. So I've been around a lot of courses and workshops that may have some piece on listening. So I thought I was a really good listener, really good listener, and being around doing this work for so long. And then I remember, I think it was in 2013 when I was doing a 3 Principles course. We did an exercise on listening, and I was gobsmacked. I was like, oh, I don't listen. I was like, wow. Now I thought I'd listened deeply. So I thought the exercise was going to be like so easy for me to do. Right? That's how I went into the exercise. And then I just got an insight like, wow, I'm listening from what I already know. So I've got lots of stuff that I know this. And then when that kind of dropped away, like when I say the absence of the mind, is that the absence of all the filters and all the thinking that I have going on, or what I think I know the person's going to say. Most of the time we're listening and we think we know what they're saying.
Yeah.
We're making assumptions about what people are saying or what they are going to say. Before they've even come to us, we're making assumptions. They're not even in the room with us, or they could be in their home, or before we pick up the phones, we're making assumptions about what people are going to say. So we're listening for a thought of what we think they're going to say.
And so for anybody, for the people watching, that would like to listen from that space more, and you said it was a natural state, but also that it's like the absence of thought. So if anyone like notices that they would prefer at some point to be listening like that, to deeply listen to someone, how would they go about that?
Yeah, good question. Experiment. Because we can all listen deeply. Deep listening is not exclusive to anybody. It's available to all of us. So what I did when I noticed that I wasn't listening on this workshop, I went back and there was a couple of people that I knew I was not listening to. And I remember on the course, I just said, like, don't beat yourself up. This conversation with me and you having on listening. It's not about then judging yourself for not listening. Because that's one place you could go straight away, like, oh, I don't listen. I'm doing it wrong. Like, no.
That's not going to help, is it?
It's not going to help. And then there'll be judgments and lots of thinking. So just notice if that happens And then I went back and experimented, and I listened to the person that I knew I wasn't listening to. And I listened without speaking, listened without having to give them my answer. Even though I was like, there were some days I was like, yeah. Couldn't. So what that was, in the practice, I got to see, oh, like, look, I want to answer straight away. Oh, they haven't even finished saying what they're saying, and I've got to get my point across. So I just noticed that, because in the noticing you get to see, oh, I'm listening through, I already know this. Oh, I'm listening through, well, that's not right.
Yeah.
You start to see, because it's not evident when you're not listening. It's not evident, the filters in the background.
And so when you went away and you were practicing, like, what was the impact of that? What did you notice? What was like different?
They were making really good points. They were quite interesting. They weren't stupid, but I thought they were stupid. Or yeah, and the other thing is, it just slowed me down. I saw, because my mind was so revved up with what I wanted, my opinions, my thoughts about what they were talking about. I wasn't listening to what they were saying, and then listening to them, even if it was just small pieces of deep listening, I got to see that I'm connecting. I'm not just speaking to someone. I'm being and connecting to another human being. It's not just the words that are coming out of their mouth. I'm connecting to another soul, another human spirit. And then I've got my opinions about them, and so I listen to them through that filter. And it was just really quite incredible, because it really connected me to their humanity. And I think that's what's available with deep listening. Like, it's not something we have to do, but there's an invitation and an opportunity to have deeper connections with people.
I love that. And when you were sharing that, Jacquie, and you said, look, like, you saw that there was a connection, like there was a connection and not just like a person in front of you. I just got this really big sense of them, like, of everything expanding. Like, so no longer is it I guess, a personality, listening to a personality, but just like a whole magical being. And that's fascinating, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. When we listen from this place of having less on our mind, the absence of the mind comes in, but having less on our mind. It creates a space, like this magical space that you're talking about, and people feel heard very quickly. And sometimes for the very first time. That's the first time they've ever been listened to in that way. And at some point in that kind of listening, you realize that this whole being that you're talking about, that there's no separation between the two of you. Yeah, there appears to be you over there and me over here. But then there's an expanded energy that you know you're both connected to, like an intelligence that you're both connected to. In the three principles, I call that universal mind, that life force energy. And it's quite magical because um, when we listen to people from this space of deep listening, from this state of deep listening, they find their own answers. They work stuff out in the silence. They just hear themselves, and then stuff gets worked out for them. It's part of the design. It's part of the natural design of this universal intelligence that kind of is more available in that space. They work out. I coach every day, at least three or four times a week, and I'm having conversations with people where they're working out their own stuff. Because there's more room in their minds for them they just get more space. They're not trying to talk and defend themselves, right? Or trying to talk because they know you're going to come in soon, and so they want to get their point across, so they're not so rushed.
Yeah.
Right.
And knowing that you've not heard that they're like not adamant on making the point. Yeah.
Yes. So then they're more relaxed in that space when they're talking. Yeah, and I think it's also very healing. Like people get to heal in that space. Stuff comes up for people where they can feel safe. It's a safety.
I found, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so maybe you found the same, but that there's a tremendous peace that comes with that as well, of knowing that everyone can find their own answers, and that they're always available. And if you mentioned it earlier, that in that slowing down and listening, or being that space and that container for someone, that there suddenly becomes less to do. And yeah, just a tremendous peace, like knowing that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, 12 years of my coaching career and facilitating and running workshops, I thought it was my job to find answers for people. That's what I thought it was, to find answers, help them to fix themselves. They were broken, they needed my help. And then I came across this understanding, principles of well-being, 3 principles, inside out understanding, and realized that everybody has access to 100% innate well-being, even if it doesn't look like it, even when it doesn't look like it, even when their behavior to other people may seem like something's not right there. Right? And so if everybody has innate well-being, like wisdom, and when I talk about well-being, I mean that they are well. The seat of their soul is well. Right? They've got wisdom, they've got common sense, they have the capacity to bounce back from things that we couldn't imagine We all have this capacity. That we have the capacity to have clarity of mind. Yeah, even though it might seem so confusing when they're first talking to you, that there is capacity within them and within me to have this clarity of mind and this deep inner peace. Peace even when things are not going right. Peace even when you're in jail. Peace even when you're in jail for life. I mentioned these extreme things because people could never imagine that you could be peaceful in places like that. Right? And I know, working in those places, that I've seen some of the most peaceful people on the planet. When they come across this understanding that we share, and we listen to them from this place, and then they start listening to themselves from this place, listening to themselves as healthy, listening to themselves as well, that they have well-being, not listening to themselves that they've broken. And it's incredibly powerful. I'll give you an example, if I may.
Yeah, please.
I've run workshops in many, many different environments. And I can tell you that sometimes people's behavior can scare people and make them think that they're not worth listening to. And I've been in workshops where men have been in the prison. There's been men that have just jumped up. Someone said something, and then someone else wants to jump up and have an argument. It's just about to get into a fight. And when you listen, I remember this happening one time. It was with me and my 3 colleagues, and this guy was so annoyed with something that someone said. It really triggered him. That was all that happened. But he thought he was insulting him and disrespecting him. He wasn't. But it was so obvious to everybody else. But to him, he was in the middle of the fire. Yeah, and he was ready to jump up and, get physical. And I remember just saying to him, we didn't know what to do as facilitators. That hadn't happened before.
Yeah.
So we're like sitting there like this, like, and so I just called his name, saying his name was Stephen. It wasn't. I just said, Stephen. Stephen. It was really loud. I said, Stephen, just look at me. Just look at me. Stephen. And then he just talked. It all came out. He just said, yeah, he shouldn't be saying that. And I just listened. And he shouldn't be saying that. And he did. And just let's let it all out. Just let him have it out. And I said, I get it. And I get it. And I get it. And I get it. And after a while, he just went, sat down, weren't happy, still weren't happy, but we heard him. Me and the other facilitators. It's just me that initiated him to look at me. Like I said, I get it. And I really just gave him my full attention. When I got distracted by one of the other guys, I just brought my attention back. I really kept my attention on him because I knew my colleagues could deal with anything else. I just kept full attention on him and just listened. And in that moment, he just sat down and just said, and then I was able to share something with him, bring it back to what we were teaching in the room. It was a really great teaching opportunity, but it wouldn't have happened if he didn't get triggered. I didn't listen to him. He didn't sit there. He didn't felt heard. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I have from that is when we listen to people when they're in situations like that, we can see their hurt. We can see they're hurting. You can see that they're insecure. You can see they're confused, and you can see they're just trying to keep themselves safe. They're just feeling vulnerable.
You can see their humanity, can't you? And like compassionately, without judgment. I've had quite a few people reach out to me around forgiveness and things, but when you're in that state, when you truly hear someone, like, there is no judgment, is there? Because it's just the way it looks right now, and that's all they're sharing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you know that, you know it's their mind creating this, and you know that, I wasn't even afraid of that. And it was loud. Maybe it was a cultural thing as well, but I just wasn't afraid of him. I didn't want the class to be disrupted because I didn't want anybody else to get hurt. But um,
I was feeling afraid when you were sharing it, thinking, "Oh my God, I don't know what I'd do if I was in prison and suddenly, like, it looked like a fight was going to break out."
there's many stories like that. But yeah, um, I don't. In the moment, I just wasn't scared. That's all I can say. I'm not going to say I wouldn't be scared in other places, but in that moment, I wasn't. I wasn't afraid of the men.
Yeah,
We felt safe with the men. Um, but in that moment, see, I find deep listening, there isn't a lot of thinking in it.
yeah,
That's why I say the absence of the mind. And people might say, what do you mean the absence of the mind? You just fall into this space where you're not, you realize you haven't been thinking much, right? It's just you drop into it, or you bring yourself back to it. And then when you need to respond, because you're in this kind of field of intelligence, an answer comes to you about what if there's a question to ask, or if there's something that needs to be said, even if it's something that you need to say to clear something up. So you're not letting people get away with things, but you can listen deeply, and then you can respond from the same place that you're listening from.
yeah.
It's hard to explain, but it's
There's
and so,
no doing
mm,
in that. There's no doing in that, is there? There's no, like, what do I say now for this situation? Like, it. You said it just comes, and it's obvious.
yes, so much so because most of the time we don't. We're walking, if you're with your family, and you'll say, "Let's cross here." You didn't overthink that. Let's cross here. Well, would you like this? We don't overthink a lot of stuff, and then there's a lot of things that we do overthink. So yeah, it just what needs to be said or what's meant to come out next comes out with a little thinking about it. Now, don't get me wrong. I used to, um, when I was exploring deep listening at the very beginning, I would notice that my mind was going, what should I say next? Um, Especially as a coach or a practitioner. So what should I say next? What's the right answer? Um, what questions should I prepare? What am I going to say to them? Have a list of questions. Make sure I tick off certain questions, and that's really good. That's really good support at the beginning. And then, but when we're concerned about what we're going to say or ticking off the questions, we're not listening fully. We're listening, but we're not listening fully because we're concerned about ourselves. So that deep listening is an absence of ourselves on some level. We're not thinking about us and how we're doing and what to say. Or do they like me? That might pop up, and you just notice it, and you bring yourself back. And if you're going like that for a while, you're going like that for a while. But you keep bringing yourself back. Yeah, and it's just a practice. It's like a muscle. It's like building a muscle. So building a muscle of where your attention is, and listening with your full attention, your full presence, loving presence is available here. And it's a choice that we make.
And you've touched on it a couple of times as well. We can listen to ourselves like that too, can't we?
I think it starts there.
Yeah.
I think it really does.
And I'm sure there is so much more you could share on this. but I think we'll leave it there for now. I don't know if there's anything you want to leave people with of like what like one last thought on listening.
Yeah, deep listening is how I'm seeing it at the moment, is our natural state. Um, when we when the thinking's dropped away. You know, we experience it all the time. You know, sometimes you can listen to a piece of music or something that someone says, and we're moved so deeply. It can be that simple. Music or something that someone said, and you move so deeply to that you just think, wow, that's deep listening as well. You know, practice it, and it's a gift.
Yeah.
Deep listening is a gift, and people feel so heard like they feel like their soul's been heard when we listen to others from that place, or when we are listened to from that place.
Thank you. And so if anybody wants to know more about that, get in touch with you about that, or know more about, because you've talked about like our innate well-being as well, and the resilience that we've got. So if anybody wants to explore any of that, where would you recommend that they go?
So they can contact me on my email. I love to hear from people. So I'd love to hear what's resonated. If anybody has any questions, I love to hear from people. Just send me a message, email me at info@jacquiemoses.com. And as you said, Victoria, listening is part of the work that I do. It's the foundation of the work that I do. And I'm working and supporting coaches and mentoring many people in deepening this understanding and deepening their capacity to deeply love people, because listening is an act of love.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think we'll
Mm.
leave it there. Thank you, Jacquie.
Thank you.